Good morning. We're in day 9 of the Donald Trump criminal trial in Manhattan for Trump's falsification of business records to interfere with the 2016 election. Here with Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Each day, every morning, we talk about what to expect that day in court. And then at the conclusion of the day's proceedings and trial, we then discuss what happened that day. Every day we create a scorecard of what went down. As I've always said, I'm a visual learner, so it helps me to see a list of everything. Just to remind you all what went down on Friday. There was no trial on Monday. That's why you didn't get to see Karen Friedman Agnifilo and I yesterday. But on Friday, Trump trial, day 8, you had David Pecker finishing his testimony. Karen Friedman Agnifilo and I and Michael Popak thought it was very powerful and kind of setting the tone and giving the jury the roadmap. You had Rana Graff testify, and she was Trump Organization longtime personal assistant. And then you had a banker, Gary Farrow, testify. Of course, throughout the proceedings, when Donald Trump would speak to the press, he would really be whining about 2 or 3 things. One, that he's very cold. He said it was freezing in the courtroom. And 2, he said that he really wants to be campaigning, and this is preventing him from campaigning. Indeed, the court is dark on Wednesdays. There's no trial on Wednesdays as Justice Merchan goes through his other cases and other calendar that he has to deal with. He doesn't stop being a judge on those days when trial doesn't take place. He has to hear all the other cases. It's tough work being a judge. But last Wednesday, Donald Trump did no campaigning. On Saturday and Sunday, Donald Trump went to no campaign stops, did no campaigning. He was playing golf. On Monday, no campaigning. So at this point, Trump's had just as many days pretty much in the week, maybe one day less, not in trial than when he was in trial. And Trump has not spent those days actually doing any campaigning. I just think it's important to note that, just to rebut a lot of the false statements that he's made. Instead, he's been spending the past 48 hours, like he has before, posting weird QAnon memes, posting memes of Jesus holding his shoulder, and posting a very bizarre QAnon video that shows Donald Trump and world leaders. And the video says things like Canada submits to Trump, Vietnam submits to Trump, NATO submits to Trump, EU submits to Trump, the Vatican submits to Trump. And then the video finishes with the QAnon slogan, where we go one, we go all. And the only reason why I'm even mentioning this on the analysis is just no other media networks are covering that. I mean, how do you not cover that that's something that is just going on? And I just think it's important that that gets attention, and you could judge that data and evaluate that data yourself, but I think you deserve to know that that's happening, and you deserve to know the ins and outs of what's actually happening in the court, and not from people who are speculating or simply giving you their opinion. What I think is most important about this network, that I just don't think really any other networks do in the way we are here, is we get people who actually know these proceedings. We got people who are former federal prosecutors, former state prosecutors, people who are involved in the cases, people who have the experience to truly give you the information that you need. And nobody has more experience for this case right now about what's going on in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, in my view, than Karen Friedman Agnifilo, the number Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Karen worked there for close to 30 years, at some points in time during her career, even serving as the acting Manhattan District Attorney. She's appeared before Justice Juan Merchan. She's been in that courtroom, never complained once in her career about it being cold. Karen Friedman Agnifilo, what do we expect today? Day 9 of the Trump criminal trial.
So today we're going to finish up the Farrow, the banker who is testifying on Friday. He just got starting on Friday. And, Ben, to your point about how Trump complaining that he's not campaigning and that he'd rather be on the campaign trail than sitting in trial, I think we should note that this is a white collar business fraud case, which means there's going to be a lot of technical business records that have to be put into evidence. Now, in most cases, or I shouldn't say most, in many other cases of white collar cases, what happens is both sides stipulate to the records because they are what they are. They don't depend on anyone's uh, credibility, right? It's like, here's a bank record and here's a check and here's a number and this person belongs to this account and this is the phone number, that kind of stuff. You don't normally have to call all these witnesses. Everybody stipulates, partly because it wastes a lot of time, but you still have to prove it. And so normally what happens is you put in a stipulation that says both parties agree that if Gary Farrow were called to testify, he would say as follows: on X date, he opened a bank account for Michael Cohen, this amount of money, whatever it is, and that's that. And so you put the records in like that. And frankly, this case, because it's a business records case and there's 34 business records, I would say it's going to add at least a week to the trial just with these boring witnesses to authenticate records that if Trump really wanted to be campaigning instead of sitting in court, they could have stipulated to this, because that's what people do, especially lawyers who have other cases that they want to get to. No one wants to sit there with the stuff that you could stipulate to. But unfortunately, in this particular case, the relationship between the parties and the distrust and mistrust has broken down so far that they won't stipulate to the business records. They're going to make the jury sit there and through these boring records but you have to do it, right? There's no other way to authenticate it. They also have gotten to the point where the prosecution is not willing to tell them ahead of time who the next witness is going to be, because they're worried that Trump can't be trusted about tweeting or truthing and social mediating about potential witnesses and jurors, et cetera. So they won't tell them that. But to the extent, Ben, that anyone says next time Trump says he'd rather be campaigning, tell him to stipulate to this stuff. He could have a whole week campaigning and we could get this case moving along, because it's what everybody is waiting for, is really the rest of the case. So I've been thinking a lot about the case over the weekend. So today, I don't know exactly who is going to be called as a witness, but I would presume it's going to be more of the Gary Farrows and the business record type people, because that is what has to be proven. This is first and foremost a falsification of business records case. So I think you're going to see several witnesses in the coming week or so talking mostly about business records and the falsifications, whether it's the invoices of the Trump organization, whether it's the checks at the banks, whether it's anything involving that. I think that's what you're going to see this week until they can get all that established and get all that out there. They might sprinkle a few interesting substantive witnesses here and there to keep people awake, although if the courtroom's cold, I'm sure that's keeping people awake. But I think you're going to see this part of the trial focusing on the falsification of business records. And then you're going to see the next part of the trial, the last part of the trial, I think, on the catch and kill Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels piece. I've been thinking a lot about it. And I would, if I had to venture to guess, I don't think they're calling Dino Sajudin, and I don't think they're calling Karen McDougal. I think both of those are fraught with peril. There's no reason. They don't need them. David Pecker did such an excellent job at establishing what you need to establish through both of them, that this was all about the election. And this is part of the same scheme to try and pay off people coming forward with negative stories to influence the election. And that's what they need in order to bump up the falsified business records charge from a misdemeanor to a felony. So I think, like I said, the misdemeanor proving the false records is going to come in this week. But the stuff about bumping it up to a felony and making it about the election, we got that from David Pecker. I don't think we're going to hear from McDougal and Sajudin. I do think we will likely hear from Stormy Daniels, but also you don't need her either. But since she is part of the scheme that is at issue here, the 34 counts are about paying her, I could see them calling her potentially. And it'll also be interesting to see calling Hope Hicks, and at what point they call her about how, again, this is all about the election. I don't know how helpful she'll be to the prosecution, but she will be able to provide some context like she did with the way David Pecker did, who, again, I just can't get over what a profoundly helpful and just amazing witness he was for the prosecution. He really, I think, far exceeded anyone's expectations in terms of the amount of information that he had and that he was willing to share with everybody. So, Ben, that is what I suspect this week and today is going to be. I think that's what we're going to see mostly.
Karen, you made a very interesting point that I haven't heard any other commentators discuss, and I want to ask you about it in a little more detail. So, what you're saying is because Donald Trump has refused to stipulate to a lot of the evidence that most criminal defendants would almost always stipulate to, Donald Trump's taking a criminal trial that may only have lasted 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops, if you have all of the normal stipulations. And it's actually Trump, by not stipulating to just basic business records, who's making this trial last a very long time. And then he's whining about the length when he's the cause of it. Is that right?
That is exactly right. And let's think about it, right? There are different kinds of witnesses. There are witnesses who it's all about their credibility. It's, do you believe them? They have a lot to say. It's about their memory. It's about their opinion. It's about their thoughts and their experiences. Michael Cohen is a perfect example of that person. David Pecker is a perfect example of that person. Those are witnesses that the jury wants to see, that the jury needs to assess their credibility, look them in the eye, and really, that's why there's cross-examination of those witnesses, and really get a sense of who they are and evaluate them for themselves. That's the main event here, and that's what everyone's waiting for, and that's what the prosecution would love to get to, I'm sure. But in any case, the prosecution and the prosecution alone has the burden to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, each and every element. And in a falsified business records case, the records are everything, right? You got to put them into evidence. And it's not like TV where you can just put it into evidence. You have to authenticate it and put it into evidence through a custodian of the records. And all of that is time consuming. In many cases, I've had a lot of trials and as a prosecutor, and I've had cases as a defense attorney now that I'm on the other side. And there are phone calls, for example, that you want to talk about between two people, or text messages that you want to talk about between two people, or emails that you want to talk about between two people. And they say what they say, right? They are who they are, these records. They're not going to change. There's no credibility issue. Someone might want to interpret them. That's a whole other story. But the records themselves, if you want to introduce them into evidence, especially records like bank records, that sort of thing, that's something you need to call someone from the bank and talk about and authenticate that information, right? Because you gotta get that established. And that is something that most people will stipulate to. Both sides have to stipulate, and both sides will stipulate because it's just boring and dry, and it's who cares, right? It doesn't change one way or the other. So let's get through the trial and get there. These records are coming in if you can get these witnesses there, right? So that's what's needs to happen. That's what's starting to happen. That's, I'm sure, why Ronna Graff testified, because she put in some she's Trump's assistant of 34 years. She was on the stand for a hot second, and they asked her a couple questions like, about calendar entries and a few other things. Now, that I could see why the defense didn't stipulate to her, because they asked her, they used her to humanize Trump about what a good boss he was and how she worked for him, and it was exciting. So I see why they didn't stipulate to her. But a guy who opens a bank account is going to say, yeah, this is the number of the bank account, and these are the checks, and this is who opened the account. I mean, that's silly, right? That's not going to humanize anyone. That's not going to help anyone. And so the business records themselves, those witnesses, that could have, if Trump really wanted to be campaigning and out there, he could have stipulated to at least some of them. Not, like I said, certain ones like Ronna Graff, okay, they wanted to humanize Trump through that witness. Fine, I get it. But the ones that are just purely the records, It just doesn't make any sense. It's black and white. It's almost like a formality that you have to go through, and everyone stipulates.
Aaron Friedman Agnifilo, thank you so much. I was on mute there for a second. We'll see what happens today. We'll see if there's any surprises. And we will let all of our viewers know what we thought the most important aspects of today's proceedings are at the conclusion. So everybody check back as soon as trial concludes for the day. Karen Friedman Agnifilo and I will be here. We will be live, and we will be discussing all of the day's events. The way we've been doing it with Political Beatdown, which is sometimes around the same time, because Michael Cohen is no longer discussing any of like the aspects of the case, we're sometimes shifting that back to that show a little bit. So Karen Friedman Agnifilo and I could cover all of the developments in the case, and that leads into the show with Michael Cohen, where I could still ask him how he's doing, how he's feeling, things that I'm sure you still want to know, but he's definitely staying away now from talking about the case itself. But we want to make sure we give you all of the updates here. So usually, we start, Karen and I, around 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific, or 4:15, 1:15. And then we usually go until court concludes in case there are any proceedings, because court ends at 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific. And then we'll usually go another 15 minutes after that. So just check in around that time. You'll see on the Midas Touch live feed the exact time that Karen and I will go live. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Here we are, day 9 of the trial. We'll keep you posted. And thanks for trusting Midas Touch and Legal AF for your destination for all of the breaking news regarding the Trump criminal trial and all the breaking news and politics in the United States. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.
Enough! Send it to the big house, not the White House. Get the new exclusive tees, mugs, and stickers right now at store.midastouch.com. That's store.midastouch.com.